You probably know someone who just vanishes when things get difficult. One day they are completely present, answering every text. And the next day, absolute silence. No replies, no plans. They drop off the map entirely, leaving everyone else wondering what happened. The usual assumption is that they are being rude or selfish, or that they simply don't care enough to maintain the connection. But what if their disappearance has absolutely nothing to do with you? What if it is not an act of abandonment at all? For some people, pulling away is not a rejection of the world. It is the only way their nervous system knows how to survive. We live in a culture that expects constant availability. If you are breathing, you are supposed to be reachable and ready to respond. When someone goes dark, it feels like a personal offense. Friends might feel ignored, and family members might feel shut out. But when life gets overwhelmingly hard, some nervous systems do not sound an alarm. They initiate a complete and total lockdown sequence. Think about what happens when a phone's battery drops to 1%. It shuts off the screen brightness. It kills background apps. It stops looking for Wi-Fi signals. It abandons all non-essential functions just to keep the core processor running for a few more minutes. That is exactly what a highly sensitive or overwhelmed brain does. When the cognitive load becomes too heavy, socializing becomes a background app. It takes an enormous amount of invisible energy to perform in social settings. You have to monitor your facial expressions constantly. You have to track conversations, formulate acceptable responses, and manage the emotional energy of everyone else in the room with you. When you are already carrying a heavy burden of stress or grief, that extra layer of social performance becomes physically impossible to sustain. So the mind simply cuts the cord. It unplugs from the external world to redirect all available energy to internal damage control. Psychologists often refer to this pattern as avoidance coping. It is a defense mechanism designed to protect you from further emotional flooding. When the environment demands more than you can give, the brain creates distance. It builds an invisible wall between you and the pressure. For a deeply wired person, the world is already loud on a normal day. They process sensory and emotional information at a higher volume. At a crisis, a conflict, or a period of intense burnout, and the volume becomes deafening. The only solution is to find silence. They are not disappearing to punish anyone. They are disappearing because their emotional circuit breaker has flipped, preventing a total system failure. Inside that withdrawal, they are not usually relaxing. Often they are working incredibly hard to process whatever pushed them into hiding. They are untangling thoughts, regulating their breathing, and trying to rebuild the internal foundation that felt like it was starting to crack. It looks like nothing is happening from the outside, but on the inside it is a high-stakes effort to restore baseline stability. This pattern often begins in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where your needs were dismissed or met with frustration, you learned very quickly that other people cannot regulate you. You learned that safety is something you have to manufacture entirely on your own. This creates a deep physical association between solitude and survival. A quiet room becomes the only place where the mask can finally drop. The muted phone is not an insult to the people calling. It is a necessary boundary against a world that demands too much. Imagine the physical relief of taking off a heavy backpack after carrying it uphill for miles. That is what isolation feels like. The shoulders drop, the jaw unclenches, the constant buzzing need to be perceived and evaluated by other people completely evaporates into the air. In that sanctuary, there are no expectations. There is no one to disappoint, no one to manage, and no one to explain yourself to. But this coping mechanism, while incredibly effective in the short term, has a profound and complicated cost that usually stays hidden. It creates a cycle. The longer you stay disconnected, the harder it becomes to plug back into the network of human relationships. The emails pile up. The unread messages become a source of guilt. The thought of reaching out starts to feel heavier than the initial stress. What started as a temporary measure to catch your breath slowly transforms into a permanent state of being, keeping you entirely isolated. And this is where the line between self-care and self-sabotage begins to blur, often without the person even realizing it has happened. There is a crucial distinction we have to make. We have to look closely at the shadow side of this disappearing act. One path is finding peace. The other path is simply hiding. And they can look identical from the outside but feel entirely different. Peace gives you your energy back. It restores your capacity. A hiding place convinces you that the entire world is fundamentally unsafe. When you retreat for peace, you eventually feel full enough to return. You open the door again because you actually want to. When you withdraw to hide, the door stays locked. You are not recovering. You are just avoiding the things that make you anxious. Avoidance coping can protect you from immediate pain, but it also starves you of the connection that might actually help you heal. You convince yourself that you are the only one who can fix your problems. You forget that human beings are designed to co-regulate. If you only rely on isolation, your world gets smaller and smaller until it is just you alone inside a very quiet room. A sanctuary is meant to be a place you visit to gather strength. It was never meant to be a place you live permanently. The goal is not to stop retreating when you are overwhelmed. The goal is to make sure your retreat has a clear exit strategy. How do you know the difference? Look at how your body feels after a few days of silence. Are you resting or are you avoiding? If thinking about replying to a friend makes your chest tighten, you might be avoiding. The isolation is fueling the anxiety, not curing it. But if you feel a slow return of curiosity about the world, the withdrawal has done its job. Your system is finally resetting. The next time you feel the overwhelming urge to disappear, try to communicate it before you vanish. It does not require a long explanation. A simple message saying you are hitting a wall and need to go off the grid for a few days changes everything. It transforms an act of perceived abandonment into a stated boundary. It protects your relationships while still giving you the absolute silence you need. True friends will not demand your energy when your battery is flashing red. They will stand guard outside the door while you recharge. You do not have to be constantly available to be worthy of love. You are allowed to close the blinds and sit in the quiet. You are allowed to let the text messages wait until tomorrow. You are allowed to prioritize your own nervous system over social obligations. But you also deserve to be supported. You do not have to carry the heavy things completely alone every single time they happen. Maybe you are not a bad friend. Maybe you are not cold or distant or broken for needing to step away from the noise. Maybe your system just learned a very long time ago that the only reliable way to find safety was to build it yourself. The next chapter of your life is not about forcing yourself to stay in the loud, overwhelming rooms when you are clearly exhausted. It is about learning to recognize when your sanctuary is starting to feel like a cage and having the courage to step outside. It is about knowing that you can retreat when you need to, but also knowing how to find your way back to the people who care. You can be deeply wired, fiercely protective of your peace, and still intimately connected to the world around you. Both can be completely true. If you recognize this disappearing pattern in yourself, or if you have a friend who does this, send this video to them. Let them know that you understand their silence and that you will still be here waiting when they are finally ready to return. Is your withdrawal a place of peace, or does it sometimes become a hiding place? Let us know your experience in the comments below. We are building a community for people who are wired differently. If this felt like looking in a mirror, subscribe and stay with us.